Wahid, you walked up there and went away. Perfect. You're such a miracle worker. We'd like to welcome everyone out to this afternoon's Planning and Zoning hearing. We'd like to remind you about cell phones, to please put them on airplane mode or vibrate or turn them off in some way so they won't disturb our meeting. If you have blue cards, wish to speak to any particular item, please fill them out immediately. Bring them up to the staff, they'll bring them to us. We are getting ready to read the consent agenda, which has most of the cases on it. And if you do not tell us you want to speak, they will be included and passed all in one group. We also would like to remind everyone about politeness, that we really don't appreciate booing or cheering or whatever on different projects. So if you would treat everybody's opinion equal to yours, they're just as important whether they are for or against a particular case. And lastly, we have a little video we'd like you to watch while you're sitting there having a wonderful time at our meeting. So if you would roll the video, please.
Welcome to the City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board meeting. We appreciate your interest in the future development of our community and welcome your comments. At this time, we ask you to turn off or select the vibrate option on your cell phones and pagers. Today's agenda includes a consent agenda. These items will be read into the record and acted on in one motion. If you would like to speak on any of these items, please fill out one of the blue cards located in the back of the room and bring it to the front railing. These items will then be removed from the consent agenda and voted on individually. Each case will be heard first by the applicant, then the public, followed by city staff and board members. The Planning and Zoning Board will then make their recommendations to the City Council. The City Council meetings are held twice a month at 5:45 p.m. in the Council chambers. To find out when the City Council will consider your planning and zoning item, please call the Planning Division at 480-644-2385 or log on to the city's website. All planning and zoning meetings are broadcast live and rebroadcast on Mesa Channel 11. To view the programming schedule, log on to www.mesachannel11.com.
Is that our last one? G2. Okay, same one. All right. Again, one last call for blue cards. We will continue with our agenda. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes from the April 16th study session and the April 17th regular zoning meeting. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the study session meeting minutes for April 16th and the meeting minutes for April 17th.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Please cast your votes. All right, passes unanimously. We'd like to let you know that Mr. Arnett, Ms. Coombs, Mr. DeBella are not here today. They are excused absences, so you just have the four of us to deal with. All right, our next item of business is the consent agenda. We have our most wonderful Mike Clement, who will be reading, and hopefully we all won't die of boredom during his recitation, but it is lengthy, so be prepared. Brother, Mr. Clements?
Yeah, Mr. Carter, that music you heard prior to the meeting, actually that was all planned. They're supposed to be playing it now to keep you awake as we go through this. That being said, yes, I would like to read the consent agenda. Beginning with case number C1, which is Z13-18, District 2, 3800 block of East Main Street. Approval with conditions. Item C2, Z13-20, 1326 South Alma School Road. That one is approval with conditions. Item C3, Z13-22, 1726 North Country Club Drive. That one is approval with conditions. Moving on, we have case D1, which is Z13-17, 8840 East Sunland Avenue. Again, approval with conditions. We have D2, which is Z13-19, 7013 East Warner Road. That is consent for continuance to June 19th, if I've got that correct. Okay, thank you. Let's see. We have item 4, which is Z13-23, the 11500 block of East Pecos Road and 6700 block of South Mountain Road. That is approval with conditions. Lastly, as I understand, we have item G1, which is the Valencia Heights 4200 block of South Val Vista Drive. And what is it's on consent for approval?
Mr. Chairman, actually, that one does need to come off consent. Also, it was connected to the general plan amendment that's prior to it. And sorry, I didn't notice that before. So that one.
The both as in 1 and 2?
Yes. Right.
Okay, so my reference to item G is no longer valid. I believe, other than that, what I read was correct. Is that true? Did I get it right?
All right, to reiterate, we have case number C1, C2, C3, D1, D2, D4, and that is our consent agenda.
That's that's what I think I read.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. The consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll now go to our well, I should say that if you were on the consent agenda, you're free to go, unless you would like to stay and listen to our citizens as they speak about the cases they're here for. Our first regular case is D3, Z13-21 in District 6, which is 1350 and 1408 South Ellsworth Road. We would like to start out with a quick synopsis by staff, have our owner's representative to give us a pretty concise statement about this, and then hear from public, at which point owner's representative and staff will follow up at the end. For those that will be speaking, we will have a 2-minute time limit. So please make your statements concise and succinct. Please don't repeat over and over again what somebody else has said, because we are interested in what you think, not what somebody may have told you about. So let's turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, members of the board. This request has a case number of Z1321. It's located at 1350 and 1408 South Ellsworth Road. It's located on the west side of Ellsworth Road, just south of Southern Avenue. The request is for rezoning the existing site, which has 2 zoning districts on there. It's existing agricultural and also the RM3 PAD. They want to rezone to RM3 PAD along with site plan review and approval of a pre-plat. All of this would allow the development of a condominium project that would consist of approximately 240 units. The overall acreage of the site is about 14.3 acres, and the applicant is proposing to develop it at an approximate density of 16.7 dwelling units per acre. The existing general plan land use designation for the site is high density residential, 15 plus dwelling units per acre. If you take a look at the site plan, you'll see that the site consists of 42 buildings that are positioned around a large central open space area with primary access provided off of Ellsworth Road. With that, I'll conclude our presentation and we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Mr. Anderson, we are graced with your presence.
Chairman Carter, members of the board, for your record, my name is Reese Anderson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Pugh & Lake, and our address is 1744 South Val Vista, number 217, here in Mesa. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening. I think it's been a long time since both Ralph and I have been here at the same meeting on different cases, and so we welcome that this time. It's great. We have worked diligently on this site, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation if you'd like me to go into it, or I can save it for afterwards. I know that between the time we met for the study session and today, a legal protest letter was filed, and we were provided a copy of that by the City of Mesa staff. And so I would prefer, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, to wait to hear what those issues are and then respond accordingly so that we don't spend our time on issues that aren't necessary. Otherwise, I'm happy, based on your direction, to give you a full analysis of the project and what we've done and why we've done it.
No, I think let's move forward to our citizens and have comment from them.
Okay.
Thanks, Reese. All right, our first item, first person, it would be, this is for GP Minor 1302, but it also pertains to Z1321. Mr. McCleve. Is Mr. McCleve here?
Yes, sir.
If you would come forward and state your name and address. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be given the opportunity to speak. In filling out the blue card, it says, do you support or not support the project? And I didn't put either one. And the reason for it was I've met, along with other people that live in the area, what they were planning on doing. And if what they indicated at the meeting is what's going to be presented, then I'm in favor of it. The reason I can't tell whether I support it or not is I'm not sure if they presented it, if what you're voting on is the way they told me it was going to be, told us it was going to be. Okay? I live at 3656 East Arcadia, and I lived there about 23 years. I love living there, and if it's presented the way it was to us at the meeting, I'm in support of it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McCleve, for your comments.
I guess I'd like to know how it's been presented.
We'll have Mr. Anderson stand up after public comment.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think there was maybe just a little confusion there because he's actually here, I believe, on the GP Minor 1302, which is not connected to this case. That's connected with Z1314 instead of Z1321. And so,
You could have told me earlier.
well,
Well, that's okay.
get back
We
to
will
this.
move ahead anyway. All right. Well, this one I know is the correct case. Mr. Moore, Mr. Floyd Moore, if you'd come forward and state your name and address. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Floyd Moore, 1452 South Ellsworth Road. I'm part of the CalAm group, and I am against, from what I understand, that they're going to have to redefine the property line where our fence is at. And I've got pictures here to show. I'm not sure how I go about this as to where the wall is and the other subdivision. I understand that that they're talking about a zoning variance of a setback from the wall of 10 feet instead of 15 feet. And if the wall is 2 feet off the property line, then that means the setback is 8 feet instead of 10 feet. And when I had built my Arizona room, I had to be 15 feet from the line. So I'm against having it zoned because of the variance of the footage of the fence and the property line. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Can that be answered fairly quickly on the property line issue? Was the fence not built in the correct location? Go ahead, please, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I know it's a little out of order, but I can answer that question very quickly. The fence for Valley del Oro, which is owned by the CalAm company and their attorneys and representatives are here, was actually built between 6 inches and 2 feet on their side of the line. So when they talk about a wall that's in bad repair or that's a different height or different color, there's not much that our client can do about it because it exists solely on their side of the property line. We've reached out to them and called their property managers to start those discussions, but we understand the property managers. I said owners, but I meant to say property managers. To start those discussions about what we can do jointly with the wall, but I ask each of us to recognize this, fixing of a wall or where it fits is not a germane to the land use question before you today. This is certainly an issue that will get worked out as we go through development.
So in other words,
that's the issue with the wall and the pictures that Mr. Floyd has. Forgot his name.
yes.
Mr. Floyd Moore has. If you look at it, you'll see that there's an offset in the wall, and it's on their side of the line.
So in brevity, then, when he's talking about the condominiums being 10 feet off the wall.
Yes, sir. To answer that question,
it's the new property line wall.
all setbacks are measured from the property line. So it's actually the opposite of what Mr. Moore is talking about. If we're 10 feet from the property line, we're actually 12 feet from his wall. That makes sense?
Yes. All right, so he'll actually be gaining space if that wall were taken down.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to Mr. Franklin. Again, name and address, 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mark Franklin. I'm with CalAm, and I'm out of our California office. So my address is 1942 Port Albans Place, Newport Beach, California, 92660. Pleased to be here today, and we are great residents of Mesa. We own 9 huge resorts here and have enjoyed for years and years operating communities here. Valley del Oro has been 35 years in its location and 1,200 sites, a beautiful RV resort that we fill every year, and thrilled to be part of the community, and very excited that someone wants to develop something adjacent to us. That's part of the progress of the city. We lodged a challenge that goes into some detail that I can't obviously cover in 2 minutes, but basically we just want to make sure, because we're concerned anytime something particularly dense goes in right next to us. This is directly abutting us on 2 sides of our property. We're concerned with the variances that are being requested for setbacks from the wall. We understand that when there's a 2-story building, residential building going in, that the typical setback is 30, or the setbacks called for are 30, and the setbacks are as small as 10 in this project. We'd certainly request that the setbacks be restored to what they are in the code. We're very concerned about traffic down Ellsworth Road, the only way in and out of this project. It's a large project. There may be 500 people living there in cars. The only way in and out is on Ellsworth. Our entrance is right down the road, a few hundred yards from this entrance. We already back up on traffic, heavy days, trying to get into our property. We're concerned what's going to happen with 500 people coming in and out of a property right next door to us. There's a density issue with this development. We understand they're asking for buildings to be closer together, perhaps, than the zoning would normally allow. And again, we have view plane issues and sunlight issues. Many of our residents abut that wall, and they look at the mountains, of course. That's why they come down for the winter. And so anything that destroys the view plane and the corridors to be able to see out to the beautiful scenery here is a problem. And sunlight could be a problem. So I'm talking quickly in 2 minutes, but we just want to make sure that everyone, takes a breath and thinks about it and make sure that this thing complies with all the rules that are in place to make sure that it doesn't adversely affect a nice, huge, thriving community right next door. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll now go to Ms. Jennifer Cleveland. Again, name and address and 2 minutes.
Jennifer Cleveland, 1326 South Loomis, 85209. I'm in the Amador subdivision. My concerns, a lot of them are similar. I'm concerned because of the 10-foot between the wall and where the condominiums are going to be. Originally they said 20, then they said, oh, no, it's actually going to be 10. My wall, as well as the Valley del Oro wall, is in bad shape. I mean, you could knock it down with almost nothing. It was built very poorly. I was told that by the HOA as well as by the landscaping company that the HOA provides, that wall is ready to fall over. And I'm concerned with all the construction and the vibration, what that is going to cause. Also, the fact that they said they're going to be putting trees in between that 10-foot portion, the overgrowth. I'm 3 houses down, but I'm concerned for the neighbors as well that are going to have, trees possibly coming into their yards. As well as they said there's going to be an additional 900 commuters. And like he said, Ellsworth is already backed up. The 60 freeway is right there. So I'm just afraid that's going to cause a lot more traffic and confusion. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Cleveland.
Thank you. So just to clarify, I am opposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our last card is Mr. Cliff Matisse.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Clifford Matisse for Calam Properties, Valle del Oro, the neighbor to the south and west of the proposed project. My address is Dickinson Wright Mariscal Weeks, 2901 North Central Avenue, Suite 200. As Mark mentioned, our property is a well-manicured residential neighborhood that is an active community for adults over 55. It has been a community that's been in place for several decades. I know we're limited on time, but I want to share kind of a testimonial as I was thinking about this case this morning. When I went out in my backyard to let the dogs out, I live with my family in a small urban house, single family, and looking out onto the back fence, I could see the 3 houses that were behind my back fence, but they were not confronting me. They were not, overwhelming me. I could see the roof line. They were there, but they somehow felt compatible with my property. The next picture, if you would, is imagine if you're in one of these homes on our property and you come out your front door, you look out your window, and you're immediately confronted with a 2-story wall of buildings that proceeds as you look to the left and the right. Yes, you look up and see sky, but you also see a wall of buildings. Does this show an example of creating a unified neighborhood? As a commission, you have an obligation to guarantee a unified residential neighborhood. Chapter 5, verse 11.5-1 of your zoning ordinance mandates the purpose of the residential districts are to ensure that new residential development is well integrated with surrounding neighborhoods. I just asked if I could have an extra minute because I know the applicant is going to be getting up. I just would implore you for...
Okay, another minute.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. This means the council or the commission is here to make sure that there are unified neighborhoods, taking into consideration neighbors when new projects come in. Your zoning ordinance requires this, your general plan conditions. We filed the legal protest to oppose this project and request denial of the project. Quite simply, this project is too large. It just doesn't fit on the land where it's trying to locate. Our protest hits 3 different areas. One is that we deserve special protections. That's a legal process at the commission for a supermajority vote that doesn't apply to you. But what is important is this project also must meet your zoning ordinance PAD criteria. We submit that it does not. It is not a project the way it's presently proposed that meets the synergy of what is required under your PAD requirements. In fact, out of 7 of those criteria in your zoning ordinance for PAD approval, we think it misses 5. We have issues with excessive setbacks. Massing is excessive. We have a third of what is supposed to be provided between the 42 buildings of separation. The lot layout is the configuration of the roads could be maneuvered to allow for better setbacks. There's no stepping from one building to our project. To serve as an example, the Amador project directly north to this project, if you look at the overhead site plan, on the north side of the property, you can see that project structured its open space so that roughly 75% of it along the property line allows for substantial setbacks from their buildings to the neighboring property. This project doesn't do that. Instead of putting the open space for their project here along the perimeter, it's put in the center. There's nothing unique about that. Unique qualities are supposed to be there for a PAD overlay district. This is a zoning district that does not currently exist, and it's doing nothing except create excessive massing, reduce setbacks, and greatly diminish the RM3 standard.
You are out of time, sir.
Appreciate the time. If I can answer any questions, come back up. I'd be willing to do that. And we oppose and ask you to deny the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn the time over to Mr. Anderson for any rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, I think it might be helpful if I just went quickly through our presentation. I will be as brief as I can, and I will speak as quickly but clearly as I can, if that's okay with you.
Brevity.
Thank you, sir. This is the site. You know that we're surrounded on the west and south by the Valle del Oro project. When I looked at their plat, they are 1,802 units. To the north of us is the Amador neighborhood. You heard a neighbor speak from there. As you can see on this enlarged aerial photo, what we're dealing with here is the northern 10 acres has an existing plat on it. In fact, you see those 3 gray pads are concrete from existing foundations. The infrastructure, the sewer lines, water lines, all those were in place, and then the economy took the downturn and this project went under. Our client acquired that 10-acre piece. It was known as Escala Villas, a condominium project. To the south of it, you can see the very narrow 5-acre piece, which is still zoned ag. Here's the zoning map today. The top 10 acres is zoned RM3, the southern 5, which, again, I don't know how you would ever develop that ag piece unless you combined it with these parcels. To use the cliche, this is making lemonade out of lemons. Here's the general plan map. This whole area is HDR 15+. Our density is 16.7. We are right in the range and on the low end. Let me give you a little bit of context of how we ended up where we did today. This is the first submittal site plan, and I want to draw your attention to the perimeter buildings, and I'm going to see if I can work this iPad correctly. If you see these buildings here, how they're orientated, with the long edge faced outside. During the early reviews, planning staff said to us, look, we think we can do this better by turning those buildings 90 degrees to minimize the massing. Fire department also asked us to change the orientation of the interior roads. And let me show you this plan. You can see here now, again, we've changed the orientation of these buildings. Right underneath me, you can see off-site parking. This plan made fire, solid waste, and planning very happy as they were able to deal with the issues on this site. Now, as part of our overall planning and the uniqueness of the site, I remind everybody that we've only got 495 feet of frontage, yet we're a quarter-mile deep. Okay? So that led to the initial designs. We have a single entrance here. I'm sorry, let me go back one. So the single entrance here, the gates are off the side, so underneath my finger there and underneath my finger there. Therefore, you can't see them. We think that's a quality improvement. This is the main clubhouse with a view of open space all the way through the site. Okay? We think that's a unique feature. Pools at both ends. This is where all the internal amenities happen. We did that on purpose, given the unique dimensions of the site, as well as we think it keeps all the sound and all of the things that could be problems to our neighbors internal to the site. So we're trying to mitigate those designs. Okay? So we've also undulated those internal streets to give some variety. All those things were done on purpose. Now, you saw in the staff report where stipulation number 2 asked us to move our Type C buildings, those are our 4-unit buildings, away from the perimeter by 15 feet to increase the setback from 10 to 15 feet. So we looked at that and evaluated. This is this site plan. Here's an enlargement of it. So those buildings, 2, 7, 8, 17, 18, and 23 have been moved away. And let me show you what we were able to do when we went back and looked at it. We not only got 15 feet, but we got 20. So we've moved those buildings further away than even the staff asked us to. And we were able to keep all the same number of parking spaces by doing it. So this was a great suggestion. And I hope you can see a little bit of a pattern here. Wherever we've had a legitimate concern brought to us, we've been responsive, we worked through it and addressed it. This is a bit hard to see, but this is the view from Ellsworth Road. So in the middle here is the clubhouse. Okay? And then you see the two buildings on the side. I'm just trying to blow it up so you can get a view here of what we're looking at. We've been twice in front of the Design Review Board who's looked at these issues, as well as our treatment of our buildings around our perimeter, where we've talked about clear story windows, faux windows, the architectural treatments there. And we're given good reviews by Design Review at both of those meetings. And just showing you some of the quality of the architecture from, this is building type A. This is our interior units, just so you can get a view of it. This is building type B, which is our perimeter building with 6 units. This is building type C, right there. Let me show you a little bit.
One.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is the one you moved away 20 feet from?
20 feet, yes, sir.
So what's on the side that is going to look into the neighbors?
I could show you that, and if you give me a second, I'll flip to the end of the presentation for a sec. This is building type B and C. They're both essentially the same. So the bookends or the ends of the buildings are the same. So you can see there where the windows, the clear story windows, all the second story windows have been positioned carefully so that you're not looking down on our neighbors.
Is that true of all your buildings?
Yes, they're all. So, and just another point too. We started off with our initial submittal of one building type. Now that, from a builder's perspective, makes a lot of sense because they get economies of. We've moved to 3 different building types with 3 different color schemes. We've done a lot of improvements here as we move through the planning process, and so we've made a lot of improvements to the overall site. Let me scoot back up to here. This is building B, which is 10 feet. Now, if I can show you real quick here what we've done to address these issues. So underneath my finger here is just the cross section of that building we're looking at. You can see here that it's 10 feet 8 inches away from the property line. Although there's a wall shown there where all our measurements, I want to just from the property line. Then what we've done is done some roof step backs. So the second story there step backs to a distance of 15 feet. Our maximum building height is 25 feet 10 inches. Now what's interesting here is in the RM3 zoning district, you can build by right 40 feet. Now it's not limited by stories, so theoretically one could build a single-story 40-foot tall building at the 20-foot mark. Now to get apples-to-apples comparison here, what we've done is two-story buildings, but shown that hey, under the RM3 category, you could go 40 feet. And that's what this drawing shows right here. We've placed those. Let me go to the next slide. This is here 10 feet. This is the next part, and I'm going to put that right there is the cross-section of the building. It's approximately 14 linear feet long. And you can see there that it's 10 feet off, and our building height there is 25 feet. Again, you can see what we could do by legal right next door. So 14 feet for a quarter mile equals 17%. So for 17% of the site, we're 10 feet off the building line.
That last slide that you showed,
this one,
where you have 25 foot 10 inches, is that at this particular place or over here on these others?
Right to the peak, the top of the peak.
So right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is your eave line on the rest of the building?
I'm going to guess it's right around 20 is my guess there. And the architects here can answer that question for us specifically.
All right. I would be interested also in, since you can also measure in Mesa to the center line of the pitch of the roof as the legal height of the building, what is that?
Well, that's an interesting one because based on that math, you could play some games, and you can see there on our other building We have just shown it to the midline of that sloped roof to get to 40 feet. Our measurement that we've called out for you is to the peak of that roof. So theoretically, what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, is a roof could be 50 feet tall at its peak if its eave was 30, because you would average those two heights to get to 40.
But you haven't done that.
No, sir. Our height that we've called out here is 2510 to the peak.
Thank you.
Okay. This is Building C, which is the 4-unit building, and you can see there with 20 feet of separation, and again, the building height, 25 feet 10. Mr. Mattias talked about the PAD criteria. He referenced 7. In the staff report, I just saw 5, but no matter. Here's what they are as we found them. A well-designed and integrated open space with amenities. I think we've done that. We've got a unique piece of property, very narrow, very deep. We've got that great interior open space. This site could be designed very militaristic, very barrack-like, straight rows like apartment complexes or that we see around the city, other places, but we've chose to create that great open space here. Private streets, yes, we've got them here. Preservation of natural character of the land, that one's really not applicable. This is just, forgive me, it's scrub desert. Okay? This is a unique building and site design rather than conventional development. We've talked about that, and we check the box in our favor. And we have a sustainable property owner association and the maintenance of all commoners. We think we've hit all those criteria that are applicable to us. Here's the question raised by many people: is the site overbuilt? The general plan is 15 plus. The RM3 zoning category allows 20 units to the acre. At 14.3 net acres, we could get 286 units. We're just proposing 240. That density is 16.7. The max building height, 40 feet. Again, we're at 2510. 10 feet of setback. That's our request. So on our south and also it would be the north side, that's just a 17% of that total distance. On our western property line, 29% of that total distance. Here's the lot coverage for RM3, 50%, and we're at 32. Okay? The open space per unit required is 175, and we've provided 316. Traffic, here's another one talked about. Ellsworth Road's planned for 3 lanes in each direction. Okay? We, as part of this project, are dedicating the land necessary, then constructing that 3rd lane, and we're also building a decel lane. So in our minds, we're doing our part to be part of the solution here. I remind everybody that we're right next to the freeway entrance onto the freeway. So you've got a several-mile radius all congregating at this single point. And I remind everybody that this is, when Valley del Oro talks about traffic problems, they've got 1,802 units coming out of this entrance. And as we talked with them at the neighborhood meeting, the line, as they told me, was really internal to their site and getting out. So with that, I've talked to the City of Mesa Traffic Engineering Department. They see no need for any more improvements than what we've got there. We've talked about these things already, but just our response to this perimeter setback concerns, we've orientated the buildings to minimize the massing. We have no entrances on the exterior. We've got clear story and faux windows, so there's still architectural interest, but nothing that would invade on privacy. We've varied the wall planes. We're using 2nd-story setbacks where we can. We've aligned the buildings with the open space on the north side, and if you look closely at the site plan, you'll see that we're on the north side, wherever there's a street or open space, the building's a little closer, but wherever there's homes, we've pulled our homes back. Mr. Chairman, that's it. I probably went too long, but I tried to give you a bit of analysis of how we got to where we are today. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We have read the staff report. We agree with all the stipulations, and we urge your support.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Anderson? It's the last button.
What's the concept of stepping? I didn't hear you address that. What does that mean?
I'll scroll back, Board Member Clement. So on this slide here with Building B, you can see there I've labeled the roof step back of 15 feet 3 inches. So what you do is the first story is built to a certain height.
That's what you were talking about.
You step back.
Got it. Okay.
It comes there. And I might add to, and I can show you the exhibits if you want, but the building setbacks for both Valley del Oro and Amador, and I have the plat exhibits here I can show you, are 10 feet on their rear setbacks.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, another question. What was the setback that was approved for the project that your client acquired?
The prior one?
Yes.
I think it was right around 25 feet.
Oh, it was. And were those single level or were they two-story?
I don't recall now. Two-story is what you tell me.
Any other questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you. Then let's do our final follow-up with staff.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. The request does include rezoning to RM3 PAD. The PAD overlay does allow deviations to development standards, which the applicant went through and explained in great detail, but staff is supporting most of those requested deviations due to the quality of the development that is presented, specifically the open space that has been provided, the building design, and the amenity package that has been presented for this development. To summarize a couple of the major deviations that are requested, the applicant is requesting a couple of deviations to the perimeter setbacks. Staff is recommending approval with a condition that would revise those setbacks. The applicant is requesting 10 and staff is suggesting a 15-foot setback. So with those revised conditions of approval, staff is recommending approval with conditions as this proposed development does conform to the general plan, and the intended density would be 16.7 dwelling units when a maximum of 20 dwelling units would be allowed in the RM3 zoning district. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Thank you. Okay, board members?
I have a question just for my clarification. So Mr. Anderson, so the project as it stands today, does it comply with the conditions that staff is proposing, or is it something different?
Board Member Clement, just to clarify what Ms. Guevara was saying, the revised stipulation number 2 applies to building type C.
Correct.
Which was 15 feet. To answer your question, the answer is yes. Okay. And we, in fact, exceed it because we've gone to 20 for those buildings.
We do not have a current site plan showing that, I don't believe.
No, sir, you don't, because we got the staff report and made these adjustments as quickly as we could. Okay. The exhibit here, though, what I presented to you is what we'll present to staff to comply with that requirement.
So as we look at our site plan, Mr. Anderson, all the small buildings located along the southern property line.
And northern.
And which one? Oh, north and south, yes. I'm sorry. Those are pulled towards the center, leaving a 20-foot setback.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to use this iPad again and put my finger on
that would be helpful. Thank you.
So this building here, these two buildings here, and then mirrored on the south side.
Okay. It's time for us to deliberate. Board members, what do you think?
So as I understand this, then, there'll be any of the issues about looking at the two-story building, you're going to be looking at bookends, is that correct, other than with the revised setbacks on the C plan, is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that right? So they're not going to be looking in somebody's back, they're not going to look at the rear, they're not going to be looking at the front. Truly, it is going to create an element of privacy.
Right, as I understand it from these larger scale colored elevations, all the windows facing adjacent property owners are all clear story windows up high. So I don't see how anyone could, unless they were in a step ladder looking out, that they'd be able to see anything.
Well, I can tell you, if I were one of the adjoining neighbors, I would assume them not build anything and to stay open forever. But that's not right.
You can't legislate views,
I know,
or lack of them.
But it seems to me, though, that the applicant has made a very good effort to meet those concerns, and given the constraints of the parcel, which are pretty obvious with its narrowness.
Suzanne?
I focus on the fact that this project with this piece of land was always slated for high density, or 15 plus density in the general plan, and that's been in place for a long time. So it's no question that something like this was going to be built. I like the applicant's method of trying to mitigate a lot of the situations, and as they went through the process, even making the project better as they went along. So I don't have any real concerns over this.
Lisa?
My question is, when they talk about the setbacks and the bookend buildings, does that address the issue of the neighbors who they were concerned about it not being far enough from their wall? They have, I guess, the deteriorating wall, or?
As I understand it, then, the way they've done it is that these bigger buildings here are staying 10 feet. But these buildings here, and here have been moved in an additional 10 feet. So they actually have 20 feet along here. Mr. Anderson, how much was our, if you were to take, you may not have this figure, if you were to take a percentage of buildings that are, or a percentage of property line where you have buildings 10 feet away, how much is that on that overall southern or northern property line?
So I'm going to use my finger again, Mr. Chairman. See if I can get it to. So this property line here, which is approximately a quarter mile long, we asked our architect to calculate how much of a distance are we at 10 feet, and it's 17% of that total line. Does that answer the question?
That answers my question.
And Board Member Hudson, your question about the wall and the neighbors, was it answered, or can I shed more light on that?
Yeah, I have a question as well. Are you going to be putting up a new wall? I don't know if that was...
Board Member Clement, that's part of our discussion and why we've reached out to the property managers and the owners, is to start those discussions, because clearly the wall's on their side of the line, so we just don't have that ability without their permission to touch it.
But we don't want a 2-foot...
You don't want a 2-foot gap
slice in between.
No man's land in there either. There's a solution, and we'll get to it, and I'm confident we will, and we'll make it better for everybody.
Did answer your question. Okay, thank you. If there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve D1321 with conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. It passes unanimously.
Yeah.
I think, Mr. Clement, did you not?
Did I not?
It shows absent, so we need to redo that.
You're out of here. You're absent.
What did I do?
It says you're not here. It says you're absent.
Could we recycle that and do it again?
Raise my hand.
Are we set, Tom? Okay, please cast your votes. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, that will be going to which city council meeting, Mr. Wesley?
I believe that's going to be introduced second. Yeah, it'll be at the first meeting in July for the actual.
Do we have a date?
Okay, introduced June 3rd and heard June 17th.
Yes.
June 3rd or June 17th?
Yeah, it'll be heard June 17th.
Okay, it'll be heard on June 17th, so that would be the next place. It's the public forum. City Council will be listening very carefully to your comments. Thank you for coming and expressing your views to us. Our last item of business, as soon as I find the agenda again, would be, our next item of business is GP Minor 13-02. And if it's okay with board members, let's hear Z13-14 at the same time. Okay, staff?
Thank you, Chairman Carter and board members. The request is for the 40 to 100 block of South Val Vista Drive that's located south of Main Street on the east side of Val Vista Drive. We really have 3 requests being heard. One's the general plan, one's zoning, and one's the preliminary plat, all 3 on the agenda tonight. For the general plan, the request is to adjust the boundaries of the existing general plan land use designation from mixed-use residential to medium-density residential 4 to 6 dwelling units per acre. Concurrent with that is a rezone request from RS9 to RSL 4.5 along with a preliminary plat. Now, this request will establish the zoning for the development of a single residence subdivision of approximately 52 lots on the small 14-acre site. So first, staff set out to evaluate the general plan request. The site has limited frontage on Val Vista Drive, so the mixed-use residential, which is somewhat more of an employment district with the provision for up to 30% of higher density residential, didn't seem like a very good fit, particularly in the context that this is really an infill site surrounded on all four sides by existing residential.
Mr. Sapp, could we also, if board members are okay, include the preliminary plat for Valencia Heights in this also?
Sure.
So we're talking about 3 different cases at the moment. Is that all right with you all? Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. All right, so with, and I'll make a correction, it's 11.25 acres, I apologize. So the request then would be for, with the RSL 4.5 district within a medium density residential 4 to 6 general plan designation. So we looked at the adjacent residential land uses that have been in place for many years. And to the north is a somewhat larger lot subdivision zoned RS9. It happens to be designated mixed-use residential, even though they're somewhat out of conformance with one another. To the east, across the eastern canal, we have a mobile home park. And to the south, we have another mobile home park as well to the west on the other side of Val Vista Drive. All 3 of those parks are higher density residential than the proposal tonight. So in evaluating the general plan proposal, we saw it as a transitional density to step up towards a higher density to the south especially. The RSL 4.5 request is straight zoning. It would leave a density of 4.87 units per acre, which is right around target. They are requesting to over-plat the lots, so there's not a PDA request to amend deviations. In fact, they're more so over-platting the lots with larger setbacks than would otherwise be required. The kind of jump to neighborhood participation, just so you know, the applicant has had 2 neighborhood meetings with the residents, particularly to those to the north that are the most concerned. If you look at the site plan, the shape of the parcel is somewhat odd. It's got several angles on it. It's not rectangular in shape. So you will see 4 proposed cul-de-sacs within the development. And initially, staff was certainly concerned that we have a street stub to that subdivision to the north, but yet we're not providing a street connection. We did push for that to connect the neighborhoods. We felt that it would be in the interest of the long-term interest of both neighborhoods to connect in that fashion. However, the applicant nor the neighbors to the north were interested in connecting. The homes to the north are 40 years old. Those neighbors have been there a long time, and they're used to their dead-end street stub, and they want it to stay that way. Moving past that, staff has sought to at least connect the neighborhoods at a pedestrian level so that people could circulate between the two. As well, you'll see in our conditions of approval, since we are recommending approval with those conditions, that we provide a pedestrian connection to the Eastern Canal, which is considered a trail corridor, as well as a high priority for bike pathway improvements in the City of Mesa 2012 bicycle plan. And with that, I can answer questions on the project. I do know that there may be some neighbors in attendance. There's some concern about the removal of the orchard and its impact on the habitat for animals. It has been there since the 1940s. So.
All right, thank you very much. Is the applicant here? Mr. Pugh, a pleasure.
Since I'm not as technologically astute as Mr. Anderson, Vanessa McDonald is going to help me get this queued up here.
Does that mean you're getting old?
It's a combination of both, desire and age. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ralph Pugh at 1744 South Val Vista Drive, Suite 217. Thanks for the few minutes to be here this evening. I think it would be helpful for a brief presentation, so especially Mr. McCleve and other neighbors who are here can listen carefully to our conditions and make clear on the record tonight what we did talk about during our neighborhood meetings previously. As the staff has indicated, this is a very unusual site. Its configuration is difficult to design. For that reason, we've created the street pattern that you saw that Mr. Sanks put on the screen. The request here really is twofold. One is to amend the general plan. The general plan at this location is for mixed-use residential, which, as you may know, is a combination of high-density residential, offices, retail. Nice thought, but in a different spot. It cannot develop on 11 acres with the limited frontage we have. So our next thought is, how do we transition from the single-family homes to the north to the mobile homes to the south, west, and the canal on the east? Our thought was medium-density residential, 4 to 6 units to the acre, and bring to the board's attention and the city council's attention one of the first cases, I think, in the city of the new RSL 4.5. There haven't been many, I don't think, gentlemen or ladies, maybe a few, but not many. So this is a good fit, we think, both from a general plan amendment and a zoning case. Generally, the issues in this case have been discussing and commenting and working with our neighbors to the north, who, as Mr. Sank said, have enjoyed a very peaceful, quiet, almost private circumstance there for at least 40 years in some instances. The orchard, interestingly enough, we have pictures in our site study of this orchard being almost mature in 1939. So we're talking long-time established citrus trees here in this location. So our thought here, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if we can, is to urge your approval of the general plan amendment and the zoning case, and for me to take a quick minute and reiterate what we have committed to our neighbors. Let's see here. Let's go on. There. This is a good shot of the plan. The most important thing with our neighbors to the north was the transition along the northern boundary. And to accommodate those desires and to avoid some of the discussion you had heard on the previous case, we agreed to stipulate to single-story heights on those homes that you see on the screen as lots 32, 33, 39, 49, and 50. Those are the perimeter lots. We have also agreed that on those same lots, plus lot number 40, we have agreed to plant 2 new citrus trees in the rear yards of those homes. It is just not practical to save any of the trees in this grove. They are too mature, they're too old. Moving them would be a disaster, and they just aren't located correctly to save. So we're committed to doing that. And I think for the sake of our neighbors who are here, I want to reiterate that everything we said in the letter that we sent to the staff dated May 7th, 2013, which all of our neighbors received a copy of, we are agreeable to everything in there. In particular, the lots to the north have been served by underground irrigation delivery. And as you know, board members, as the City Council knows, as the staff knows, we cannot develop this property in a way that is harmful or inimical to their ability to continue to receive irrigation delivery. And so I want to make that perfectly clear. We are agreeable to that. We are also committed to the side yard setbacks that are shown on our preliminary plat, which meet or exceed the city standards. One of the interesting questions was, what are we going to do when we develop this site and the pests that are in this orchard migrate elsewhere, scorpions, mice, and whatever else might be in there? We have committed to find a commercially available repellent of whatever we can to, during the time that there's the dirt work going on, we are committed to applying that as best we can to mitigate that circumstance. But we could not promise that there would not be a rogue scorpion that might find its way across the way, but we'll do the best we can because it's important. The other thing is our neighbors do not want, and nor do we want to have any commercial traffic, any construction traffic through their neighborhood to the north during the course of construction. We have agreed to avoid that. The real issue for the moment is the crash gate and the pedestrian access. We have worked very carefully with the neighbors to the north and have agreed with them that installing a crash gate where you see at the top of this, I'm going to try what Mr. Anderson did and see if it works. Well, that didn't do it. That was worse. There. At the top of the open space area to the far right as you look at the plan, that row of trees is really designed to accommodate what will be a fire lane into our property. And at the very northern edge there will be a crash gate so that fire, police, ambulance, if there is an incident at the entrance to our project on Val Vista, they can get there. Frankly, it serves to benefit the neighborhood to the north too, because if there is a traffic incident at the entrance to the neighbors to the north, an emergency vehicle could come through this project and access it for rescue purposes. We're all on the same page on that. And then in the course of discussing the crash gate for the road, the conversation came up, what do we do with pedestrians? Our initial thought was, let's put a gate next to that crash gate so that pedestrians can have free access to both subdivisions. In further conversations, it became very clear to us that our neighbors do not want any traffic, not vehicular and not pedestrian. During the course of that meeting, we agreed with them and said, it doesn't matter to us. We are agreeable to that. If that's what you'd like, we will make that commitment. And so in this letter to the staff, we did commit that we would not have a pedestrian gate there. And I think that's the only point of divergence between us as the applicant and the staff. We agree with all the conditions in the staff report. We agree with their recommendations, except for condition 8, which deals with that pedestrian access. Frankly, board members and ultimately City Council, it's up to your discretion on what to do about that. We are standing by our commitment to the neighbors, and our preference would be not to have a pedestrian access way there. If you think it's important, do what you need to do, but we think given the relatively small number of lots in both the subdivision to the north and the 52 lots in our subdivision, it's not like we're blocking off a whole quarter section of land or a quarter mile or half-mile areas where you can't have access. This is relatively two private communities. So that's really the only issue of disagreement with the staff on this case. And you may hear from some neighbors, but we do have letters of support. We did get comments of support at our last meeting. And you heard Mr. McCleve here earlier with his comments. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. If I answer questions, I'd be happy to. Maybe a minute to respond and rebuttal if issues come up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of cards. Mr. McCleve, do you have anything else you would like to say? I do need you to come up here if you're going to.
I agree with what that gentleman said. And my point is, as long as we have it the way we agreed to it, I'm in favor of the project.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
But
McCleve.
I think we have other people that want to talk about it. Now, I don't know that. But.
Well, we do have one more blue card from a Miss Ortega. Or Mr. Ortega? Sorry. If you would come forward and state your name and address. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Norman Ortega, 3625 East Arcadia Drive. All right. Building the project, wonderful and all that stuff. But what we're concerned about is the houses that are going to be right up on our backyard. And we've asked for setbacks, to preserve setbacks the way they are in the ordinance. And they say that it doesn't exist, or we can only do 5 feet the first time, then it jumped to 15. And then I thought, why don't we just put an alleyway that would serve us in the setback? You can put all the easement piping in there, which is another thing they want to do. They want to do construction on our yards. And some of us don't have space in our yard for them to work on the easements. And if you put it all in the alleyway, there everything could fit. It would serve the community. It would serve the future for any future advancements. And that's what that diagram there shows. That it would not take anything away from their project, building an alleyway that separates both neighborhoods, and then they can put their wall and build whatever they want back there, because that's basically what they're going to do. But if you have that wall and you have that alleyway, serves as an easement for the city, for utilities, et cetera, because right now the utilities, some of them are in the orchard, some of them are in our backyard. And if you create this alleyway, you can put everything in there, and nobody has to, worry about it. And an alleyway is like 16 or 20 feet of separation, and I think that would make everybody happy, and they can build whatever they want.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your views.
Now, these diagrams, can I submit them to you so you can look them over, or do I give it to Sanks?
You would leave them with the staff so they become part of the public record.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Pugh?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in response to Mr. Ortega, he has been very consistent in attending our neighborhood meetings, and we have discussed the issue of the setbacks between the property to the north and this property. All of the setbacks in our preliminary plat are consistent with and comply with the city's ordinance for the separation between an RSL 4.5 zoning and an RS 9 zoning to the north. So we're not asking for any deviations. This is not a PAD. We're not asking for modifications from the code. Mr. Ortega's comment about an alley 30 or 40 years ago might have been an idea that would be accepted. The City of Mesa, I don't believe, is interested in alleyways today. In fact, many of them are being abandoned, and we're not interested in creating an alley behind those lots. It serves no purpose. We will work with the neighbors on the wall and the electrical service back there. It is old, let's face it, and we're going to have to figure that out. But again, that's not a zoning issue, it's not a setback issue, it's not a plat issue, it's just neighborhood issues we're going to have to deal with during the course of construction. So with that, we urge your support and recommendation of the case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, do you have any questions?
I was just curious what the resistance is to a pedestrian gate. That seems such a favorable amenity to have, if you don't mind.
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Clement, the best I can describe it, because all of the neighbors who have attended the neighborhood meetings are not here tonight, I think the overwhelming sentiment is we have what is analogous to a gated private community here, although it's not gated, but it is very private. You don't turn down Arcadia Street off of Val Vista unless you're going to see somebody there or live there. It's been a very enclave-type existence. And if I could put words in my neighbor's mouth, it would be, we like that. And we don't want, I'll use this word carefully, children, young adults, teenagers, from the property to the south coming into our neighborhood. And that doesn't assume that everyone's going to be a trouble causer, but it assumes that some might. I don't know how else to describe it. That's the best I can identify it for you. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Staff, do you have any last words?
And thank you, Chairman Carter. And just to reiterate, one reason that staff was seeking the pedestrian access was because there will now be, with the condition of approval as well, you'll note for the Eastern Canal for the future bicycle trail, as these neighborhoods continue to mature, this would be the neighborhood's north access way to the canal regional trail system. It's identified with Maricopa County Trails system as well as the City of Mesa priority. And it's just good planning sense as far as we're concerned. So, thank you.
All right, board members, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I guess I have a question. Is it okay?
Okay.
What do we do about condition 8, non-gated pedestrian access?
You would have to eliminate condition 8 in your motion.
Or leave it in.
Well, if you just give a motion for approval, it's automatically in. But if you're going to give a motion for approval without it, then you would have to state that you're not including stipulation number 8.
Thought I would have on that, if we were to leave it in, they could always jointly double lock it, and then it becomes part of the, and then at some point it could always be opened again. But actually, I agree with the city's position. It seems like you would want to grant that subdivision access to this great amenity that's coming.
Well, it seems like they've made the decision they really don't want access to that amenity. So,
current owners, anyway.
Yeah, the current owners.
No, understood.
So us.
The applicant agreed they didn't want. They agreed with them. They didn't want it either. Why don't they want it?
Mr. Pugh.
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Hudson, I didn't hear the question completely.
I thought that you said that you were in agreement with the neighbors as applicant not to put the pedestrian gate in.
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Hudson, that's absolutely correct. We are in agreement with the neighbors, and we would prefer not to have the pedestrian gate.
And why
My
is that?
question was, do you agree with them?
I'm going to answer Mr. Carter's question, the chairman, on that topic, because we are committed to that, and we made a promise to do that during our second neighborhood meeting.
But if they suddenly made a decision that, oh, it's okay, then you would go right along with it.
We would do this either way, but I'm not going to stand at this podium and say something different than I committed to a room full of people 3 weeks ago. Thank you.
Understood. All right, we're still at motion stage.
I lost my agenda.
What are you hunting? Your agenda?
Yeah, I buried it looking for all this. Here it is. Okay. First, a question. I'm trying to find the different paperwork on the 14 and the 02 and the plat and put it all together. Is it consistent number 8 in all three of them?
Only this one. I don't know, is it in the plat? It's not in the plat.
I'm sorry?
Number 8, it's not a condition in
It's not in the plat, but
it's not in the plan. Is it in the plat? Number 8, is that a condition?
It's a
Only in the
condition.
zoning.
It's only in the zoning, correct?
Yeah.
It's only what?
It wouldn't be part of the GP minor or the plat itself.
Just the 13, 14.
Right, just the zoning case itself.
Okay, I'll make a swing at this. I make a motion to approve GP minor 1302, approval with conditions, Z1314 to be approved without condition 8, and the preliminary plat, which is G1. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me. I have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, board members, please cast your vote. Passes unanimously. I believe this one will be going forward to that June 17th City Council meeting also. So if you have any words for City Council, that would be the place to go on June 17th. You know, one thing we did not do, board members, we did not vote on the minutes, did we?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Oh, we had so much excitement today. If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman,
oh, we have Gordon.
We tried.
I'm sorry, Gordon.
Yeah.
I am embarrassed. Perhaps your elucidation could be as precise as it was earlier yesterday.
I know how to take a hint, Mr. Chairman. We'll make this as brief as possible. The staff is coming before you today with a proposal to change 14 items in the zoning ordinance. This is part of our ongoing effort to keep the updated zoning ordinance, which became effective in September 2011, as a living document, something that okay, well, while we work on the technical issues on this, I'm going to do this with hand gestures, I guess. In the staff report, there's an Appendix A and Appendix B. It probably provides a fairly decent description of what we're trying to do. I'll explain these as briefly as I can. The first set of items has to do with a proposed set of some land use revisions. In particular, item excuse me, 1 has to do with modifying small recycling facilities that are in the downtown business district 2. We'd like to increase the minimum or the maximum square footage of that from 1,000 feet to 5,000 square feet. Part of this is to accommodate some existing uses that are currently without the benefit of a special use permit. However, we believe they're compatible uses given the mix of uses that are already along Broadway. And so for this reason, we feel the code amendment would be appropriate in this circumstance. Second item that we're considering, okay, cool. We're up and running again. The second item has to do with community gardens in the downtown core. This was something that was overlooked slightly because we didn't we weren't sure about the future of the downtown zoning districts as we were going through the form-based code process. Now that that's been settled, we feel we can go back and make some amendments to that now that we understand that it's going to be kept for a while. In this particular case, the existing Mesa Urban Garden that has been somewhat successful recently adopted. We've been doing that through a zoning administrator interpretation. We'd like to codify that to make sure that there isn't any question about the legality of that particular use. The third issue has to do with RV storage lots that are in the RSPAD districts. These are typically RV storage lots that are done as amenities for different types of master plan communities. Oftentimes, these facilities are initially operated by the homeowners associations. Oftentimes, the homeowners association decides it doesn't want to be in the RV storage business, so they sell these properties to people who want to be in that business. However, because of the residential zoning and the fact that this is considered an accessory use as part of the master plan community, they're not able to sit here and market the RV storage lots to people outside of that particular planned community. What this would do would be provide a special use permit opportunity for these folks. It wouldn't change the zoning district, and we would be able to continue the activities that are there now. The other has to do with the use of modular buildings during remodeling. Currently, the ordinance allows this during new construction, but it doesn't make any provision for using temporary buildings as a temporary place of business while you're remodeling an existing building. We feel that that's a reasonable activity to take. Not all remodeling activity requires a building permit. In the event that it doesn't, we would issue an administrative use permit, and we would time limit that for 6 months, which can be renewed for another 6 months. Some of the design standards that we're proposing to do, one has to do with right now in the ordinance, if your home backs up to an existing alley, you can make use of half of that alley when you calculate your rear setback. You currently cannot do that when you're adjacent to a canal bank or a canal maintenance road. We'd like to propose to add that to the list and provide those people that are adjacent to canal banks with the opportunity to use a little bit more of their property for residential additions or other types of, using the same type of logic that extends for the alleys. In the RM districts, we're proposing to allow some massing and articulation related to the balconies and patios that might be adjacent to multiple residence projects to move forward toward the buildings, sit here and allow some of the designers a little bit more creativity in terms of the design of the building by using some of that landscape setback that's adjacent to the street. This would be allowed for up to 10 feet for an encroachment for those purposes. As part of the zoning code update, one of the things that was done is that in most of the commercial districts, we reduced the arterial street setback from 30 feet to 15 feet. We did not do that with the industrial districts. We'd like to extend that policy to the industrial sites. In addition to that, when we initially were looking at some of our parking regulations, one of the things that we did was take a look at the possible reduction of minimum parking requirements when your property is adjacent to or relatively close to a transit site. When we initially did this, we assumed the radius to be at 1/8 mile. We'd like to increase that to a 1/4 mile. This is based on some of the discussions we had, again, related to the form-based ordinance discussions, where we determined that a pedestrian shed was effectively 1/4 mile in these circumstances, and we'd like to extend that reduction to take advantage of that. Another option that we're taking a look at is the option to substitute ocotillo plants for trees. We'd like to do that on a 2-to-1 basis. This would be allowed for up to 10% of the required number of trees that are allowed in a particular development. In the desert uplands area, that can be increased up to 30% under this proposal. In addition to that, again, under the idea of trying to encourage some unique aspects of building design. We'd like to allow buildings and patios to encroach into the corner landscape radius, but keep the parking lots back at the corner radius. Again, trying to provide the opportunity to bring some interest into the building design by making use of some of those open spaces, but keep the parking back where it's not necessarily being the major thing that people see when they're traveling along the arterial street. Some of the processing technical revisions we're proposing, one is to confirm the current interpretation of how we measure separation or buffer requirements. Currently, there is some language in the code that speaks to this. However, it's not as clear as it could be. We'd like to clarify that language to make sure that, again, we measure separation requirements from the campus edge of the protected use to the wall of the proposed use. This is basically assures that we keep whatever that minimum distance requirement is, and we keep it from any activity that might take place on the protected use. Some of the technical revisions, again, currently there are two sections of the ordinance that have to do with detached accessory buildings related to residential districts and agricultural districts. For the most part, these are word for word. Rather than worry about redundant language, we'd like to consolidate those into one section of the code. With the adoption of the form-based codes, we'd like to list them formally in the base zoning districts that are in Chapter 3. Again, this is a technical issue. Form-based coding has been adopted for the city as an option, but this is a matter of just incorporating it formally into the zoning code. In addition to that, there is a typo that we, rather than being able to sit here and just kind of clarify this, in the RSL district that Mr. Pugh was just talking about, it says on the table RSL 2.0, it should say RSL 2.5. And rather than go through just kind of trying to sit here and fix that up as a typo, we feel that it would be more appropriate to go through the more formal process so everybody understands the intent behind that. So with those 14 items, we believe that, again, we're creating a living document. We're trying to address things as we use the code a little bit more and try to keep the code up to date and current with what we believe are the current standards. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Mr. Sheffield?
Thank you.
You're safe.
Got lucky this time.
And that concludes our planning and zoning meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman.
You want a motion for that?
Do we have to adopt this?
It's a recommendation on the council.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Update to the zoning ordinance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, please vote. It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion for adjournment. Is that the next one?
Yes, it is. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Is everyone ready to go home? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.